Coming to you from South Florida, the Casey Ingram Show broadcasts from the heart of the Manatee Pocket, atop the Fish House District and a marina, Port Salerno's hidden gem. Now here's Casey Ingram, Unleashed.
Stand in the shadows, Ingram calls the shots. Speaking truth to power where the rebels lost. Voices rising, anger crackles through the air. Casey's being unleashed, raising hell without a care.
Well, good morning. Today we are speaking with Senator Gayle Harrell. We're getting a very important legislative update, and she's zooming in with me today because we had a sick engineer at my studio. So I really appreciate you, Senator Harrell, joining me.
No problem. No problem. Happy to do it.
Fantastic. For those of you who don't know, Senator Gayle Harrell is a Republican member of the Florida Senate representing District 31, which includes part of Martin, St. Lucie, and Palm Beach counties. She has been serving in the Florida Senate since 2018, following a lengthy tenure in the Florida House of Representatives from 2000 to 2008, and again from 2010 to 2018. A strong advocate for healthcare policy, Harrell has focused much of her legislative career on issues like Medicaid reform, patient protection, and improving the state's healthcare delivery systems. She has also been actively involved in education initiatives, economic development, and technology innovation, particularly in the health tech sector. Harrell holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from the University of Florida. Before her political career, she worked in the healthcare industry as a consultant and administrator. Throughout her public service, she has earned recognition for her leadership on health-related legislation and efforts to support Florida's growing senior population. She's known for her conservative stance on fiscal responsibility, limited government, and family values. She has led the fight to preserve and protect our state parks, including Jonathan Dickinson State Park, from the misguided attempt to build 3 golf courses in the unique natural habitat of the park. She's been a leader in procuring funding for comprehensive Everglades restoration and stopping releases from the Lake Okeechobee, and has always been a champion for our children. Gayle was married to Dr. James Harrell, who's now deceased, for 53 years. She has 4 children and 8 grandchildren and an active member of the First Presbyterian Church in Stewart. So today, Senator Harrell, lots to talk about. I have to say, you have filed 25 bills, which I think is the maximum you can file, right?
Well, actually, in the Senate, we don't have a number. We can file as many as we want. It just comes down to your workload.
That seems like a lot, but I'm very excited. We're going to go over all of them, but there's one in particular. We're going to start out with the one everybody's talking about, and that is what we call SB 80, Senate Bill 80, the State Park Preservation Act. So I'll let you tell us a little bit about that act, and then I have some questions for you to follow up.
Wonderful. Well, I'm delighted to have filed this bill when we were having all the demonstrations and outcry against what was being proposed by DEP to build golf courses, 3 golf courses in Jonathan Dickinson State Park back in August. And it wasn't just our park, it was across the state. There was an initiative to really kind of commercialize our parks. And that's not what they were established for. They were there to, and if you go back to the history of our state parks, to protect and preserve the natural habitat, the resources of Florida, the beautiful flora and fauna, and also historical sites. Both sides of it, both in the natural environment, but also the historical sites. And to preserve and protect them for our residents, our visitors, and most importantly for me, our children. And when you start putting pickleball courts and golf courses and hotels in state parks, that's not what the original purpose was. So we wanted to make sure that we are preserving and protecting those parks for the future generations. And we immediately was my first bill filed. You can tell by the number.
It was your first bill.
First bill filed as soon as I was reelected after the election. I filed it immediately. And it really does 3 things. It really establishes in statute very carefully what you can and cannot do in a state park. It clarifies what the purpose of the parks are, and also says that it is there to protect and preserve the natural environment for the enjoyment of people. That doesn't preclude you from being there and using the parks. We want to make sure there's hiking and biking and canoeing and all kinds of activities for people to do to enjoy the state parks. We want to have visitor centers. We want to have bathrooms, essentials. And we want to make sure that they're there. And we very specifically define what you can't do. You can't build pickleball courts, you can't build golf courses, and you can't really do any kind of major development in the park that isn't conservation related. So it's the second thing it does is really make sure that we have transparency. And one of the big outcries was when they tried to do this, there was a 2-day notice, 3-day notice, and there was going to be a meeting for an hour. And then all of a sudden this would happen. There would be a change in the management plan and they would go ahead and do this. We're not going to let that happen. We want public input. It is so important. We want transparency. So we're requiring that you have at least a 30-day notice, and there has to be a very public hearing. There has to be, things have to be posted on the internet. There has to be electronic communications out there so that people know exactly what's being proposed. And then thirdly, a very important thing is it really asks the DEP to really evaluate the needs of our parks. We have a lot of structures that need to be repaired. We have a lot of needs to rehabilitate some of these areas. I know, for instance, in Jonathan Dickinson State Park, the wonderful tower that you used to be able to climb, and my kids have climbed it.
Right.
They went to Girl Scout camp down there, and they're in disrepair. So we want an evaluation of our park properties and what over the next 10 years, what we need in order to fund that. Once we get this bill passed, then I'm going to be very specifically targeting direct funding. But let's get this bill passed. Let's make sure that we are protecting our parks. And that's my whole endeavor. That's my number one bill. First bill filed, and I made that promise. And, that I was going to do this, and promises made, promises kept. Now I need everybody's input to across the state to call their legislators locally, ask them to go on as a co-sponsor, ask them to support this. I'm so thrilled that Representative John Snyder is my partner in the House, and he is equally passionate to really get this bill passed. So hopefully I want to make it happen as soon as possible.
Senator Harrell, everybody is so grateful. And you were there last August when this was first announced, and you were out at Jonathan Dickinson State Park. You said then you were going to, work to protect our parks. And yes, you had that bill filed immediately. So we are so appreciative of that. And I think it took a lot of people by surprise that somebody could build hotels, pickleball courts, golf courses in our beautiful state parks. These aren't county parks. We already have pickleball in those. And, this is our state parks that we're preserving what's left of natural Florida, wild Florida for future generations. So thank you for taking the lead on this. And I say that personally. Last week, I happened to have the Loxalucy Headwaters Initiative folks on, and they're comprised of different groups. And they had mentioned that there was a letter sent with 70 groups that love the bill, but want it to be a little bit stronger. And a couple concerns they brought up, and I'm going to run them by you so you can address those, was the provision in the bill where it focused on areas in the state park that are disturbed. They said that pickleball courts and that could still be not introduced, but proposed. And then it goes through a committee, and please tell me if this is wrong, but it goes through a committee and whether or not it can be approved. And if it is, it's only on disturbed areas. Their concern was like something with Jonathan Dickinson State Park used to be a military base. Are they going to consider those areas where the military base was that's pretty much been taken over by Mother Nature again? Is that going to be considered disturbed areas?
Not according to the bill. The bill is very specific, and it says that anything that is proposed for the parks must be enhancing the park. And it doesn't include things like pickleball courts. and it very specifically precludes them. We do have disturbed areas, and that's where we want to put things like the cabins. We might, we do allow for cabins up to 6 people. That's where you would want to put bathrooms or visitor centers, things that enhance the park for the natural preservation of it. It does not, it very specifically precludes things that are not there to really preserve and protect the park. But we have to have something. You have to have roads. People can't access it without some roads there. So you can't get so prescriptive that that nothing is allowed. Otherwise, people can't enjoy them. So we want to. It's a balancing act. You can't be so narrow and so prescriptive that you don't allow anything to happen in our state parks.
And it's a tough thing to do because there's unintended consequences sometimes when you're writing bills. It could be that you don't let anything be built. It's so restrictive. So I completely understand where you're coming from. It's a very tedious process, I would say. Well thought out process.
One of the additional things in the bill that I think is so important is the transparency. If we have something like that happening, if somebody tries to do a disturbed area and build a pickleball court or something that's inappropriate, the transparency is there. People will be noticed. There's going to be public hearings. You've got 30 days to get together and really emphasize how important the preservation aspect is. So I think that also makes sure that there's input, there's public comment, and that we have not just 2 or 3 days to let our road know, but way ahead of time, and you can organize and you can really put the effort into stopping things that you think are inappropriate.
Agree with you completely. I'm a big one on transparency, and it was amazing how much feedback there was in 72 hours, right? Just imagine what there would have been with 30 days. So,
yes, can you imagine in 30 days?
Would have been a lot more. And there was a ton there before. The other issue that they brought up was the land management plan. They said there's a provision in the bill, if the state park is not living up to its management plan, then the state could get rid of the park for something else to make money, like perhaps multifamily housing or something else. In other words, if there is inadequate funding, what is the protection for the park? And they even brought up that observation tower as an example. If somebody came in and said, it hasn't been repaired for the last 2 years, you guys don't have enough money to keep the park up and running, therefore we're going to come in and get some sort of return on investment.
Well, that's why, the return on the investment is improving the park and improving the tower. And that's why the third part of the bill that really says we want to know what repairs are needed. And, we are going to, I am going to make a concerted effort. And I can tell you there is great concern across the state about making sure we put the dollars into our state parks. So that is the third aspect. So we have that accounting. We know what we need, and then we can go forward and get the dollars to repair things.
Just an important part of the bill. Again,
that is an important part of the bill.
You're going to go through every state park, and see what needs to be repaired and
what needs to be repaired, what needs to be done. How can we make sure that there is access to the facilities, there's access to the parks, and that we have, all those things. And especially in our historical parks, there may be things that we want to enhance in our historical parks to make them more open and available for people to come and see them. And when things fall into disrepair, it takes a lot of dollars to bring them back up. If we're consistent in what we're putting into our parks on a regular basis also, then we won't have this whole long list of repairs at the end of the day. So it's two things. It's repairing, but then also preserving.
As a follow-up question to that, if this bill passes, would the funding aspect of it come next session in 2026 then?
Well, I think we need to pass this bill first. And once we get that through, then we are going to continue the work for getting the dollars. And I didn't want to muddy the waters in putting in something where we're going to be funding things or taking a percentage of, say, the dollars we're getting from the tribes, which are now going into environmental purchasing land and the wildlife corridor maintenance. that's the source I'm going to look at as we move forward. So, I just like though we put money in for preservation of an enhancement of the wildlife corridor, I think this is a natural place to put this to ask for these dollars. But if you start doing that within this bill, then you're risking the preservation side. And money's tight this year. It's going to be a difficult year. And so we're looking at the policy first, and then we'll look at the appropriation second.
And I'll say this to Senator Harrell, is you're familiar with trying to get funding for these environmental and conservation projects. We mentioned SERP, and when I was giving your biography at the beginning of the show, that is over $100 million. You tell me it's probably over a couple $100 million, but tell me for sure where that's at. And that is something you helped usher through legislation. So you know how to get the funding, but you need that legislation in first.
Yes, we need the policy in first, and funding will come, and we are going to work very hard to make that happen. What I did back in 2015, 10 years ago, oh my God,
unbelievable! I know, seems like yesterday.
Was pass Legacy Florida, which established the direct funding source for comprehensive Everglades restoration. And it required that 25% of what we used to call Amendment 1 money, the Land Acquisition Trust Fund dollars, go into Everglades restoration. And we have put over the years, not just that money, at least $200 million every year. It's been much more than that every year.
Wow, every year.
400 to 500 million. But probably we have put over almost $5 billion into comprehensive Everglades restoration.
Amen.
So we have, and establishing that direct funding source is absolutely key. We're going to be looking to do essentially the same thing for our parks.
And I just wanted to point that out because you've done this already. So I know people are going to be saying, but there's no guarantee in funding, and there's no guarantee in anything in life. But you've been there where it's really tough to get the funding, find it, and you found a way to get over $5 billion now.
Yes, we're almost at 5 billion. I think it's 4.8, somewhere in that range.
Absolutely incredible. Once SB 80 is passed, how will it be evaluated once it's implemented? Do you have something in process or in the legislation that looks back and says we need to tweak this, or it's working?
Well, I am sure I will hear from people.
No doubt.
As it moves forward, there still may be a few more tweaks as we move it forward. And we want to make sure that it is, as carefully written as possible. So, there may be one or two more minor things that happen along the way, but I think it's an essential bill right now. And we're going to continue to move forward with it. But there's always room for improvement. And, you never know. And as things arise, you have to address them. And sometimes there are unintended consequences. Some are things that you didn't foresee, but that's what glitch bills are all about. And I've been known to do a few of those too.
It happens, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Senator Harrell, thank you for spending so much time on SB 80. I really wanted to dig into that a little bit more because that's really what's most important to a lot of constituents, not only here, but across the state. And such important legislation. And again, thank you for being the leader on that and trying to do something to make sure our state parks are protected for forever. Also, I want to thank you. You've agreed to come on, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is, and give legislative updates through sessions. So we'll be doing these Zoom calls together, and then I'll be sharing them through social media. Appreciate that very much. So important. I wanted to briefly go over your other 25 bills. We won't go as in depth, but just kind of know what you're proposed and tell us a little bit about them. So I'll just go right down the line. The first one is Senate Bill 112, Children with Developmental Disabilities.
Oh, this is such an important bill. I could spend 2 hours on that one.
Oh, boy.
And it's a priority for me and our Senate President also. So I am delighted to be doing it. And we want to make sure that we're getting services out there to students with autism. And we're seeing increasing numbers of children with autism, and principally through early identification. And that is key. The earlier you get a child into therapy, appropriate therapy, the better they are, and the more they can adjust, and the family can deal with autism. And it's a spectrum. It's a very wide spectrum. And part of what we've done over the years is in identifying that spectrum, more people have been put in that category as having autism. We want to make sure we're getting dollars into schools in rural areas to establish either charter schools or schools specifically for children with autism. And and we want trained people. We're establishing a micro-credential so that even in the nursery schools and pre-K and things of that sort, that everyone who is working with a child with autism has some very basic training in understanding and dealing with children in autism. And one of the most important things it does is it really includes and expands our early steps program. And those are home-based services that are given to parents with children with autism in the home. And when a child at age 3 is available to school-based programs, but we're extending it to 4. So you can get home-based services up and through 4. And then at 4, kids are ready for pre-K and things of that sort. So you can go to the school-based programs. But we want to make sure there's that continuum of care, and that parents who opt to more home-based services have the ability to do that. Very important bill. And I'm just thrilled to sponsor it and want to make sure that we get this through. And we're going to put additional resources, of course, into that as well.
That is really important. You touched on something. It's very key. For the earlier that you intervene and can help children with autism, the better. So absolutely. Let's start before 4 years old. So
very much so.
Makes sense. The next one is Senate Bill 210, animal cremation.
Oh, this came right out of our local community. And we had a situation here locally where one of our families had a family cat for 18, 19 years, a part of the family. Cats are family members.
Yes, they are.
They are. So when the pet passed, Sevilla was her name, the family wanted to have a private cremation. They wanted to kind of let all the kids come in and from elsewhere, and do kind of a goodbye and a cremation. Well, when they went to the crematory to do that, the cat had already been cremated. And as they said, it was a catastrophic process failure.
Oh, boy.
When the cremains came back, the family noticed a tooth or things within it that were not appropriate. So they had it tested at University of Florida Vet School to find out exactly what was in the cremains. And they were human cremains.
Oh, my goodness. Oh.
Yes.
Oh. There's another family that's going to be upset. Oh my goodness. There
was glass, there was human cremains, there was, it was so sad. So this is really, there's no regulation. There's nothing currently other than you have to get, the crematories that do pets have to get an air permit, $100, not license, even a permit to have a pet crematory. It's $100 air purity.
How are you making sure they're not combining?
Well, we're putting this under the Department of Agriculture. You will have to register. And they will also have to make sure they give you a list of exactly what their services are. Now, you can have individual cremation of your pet, or you can have group cremation where maybe there's 8 pets that are cremated together in separate little compartments, and you get your cremains back. And they have to tell you up front in a brochure up front what you are paying for exactly. And then they have to say, we are going to do this. They have to guarantee that this is what we're going to do. And if you find else, that this is not the case, they don't live up to what their obligation is that they are telling you you're going to do and you're paying to have done, then you can make a complaint to the Department of Agriculture, and they can be fined if they're not doing things appropriately.
So I get this from the pet side. I had no idea that this is what the spill was about. So I'm a little taken aback that human remains were found with their cat remains. What about from the other side, from the crematoriums that are cremating humans? I know myself, my dog has been taken to a human crematorium, so they do that. What's the protection for, the human side of it?
Well, we're not touching the human side. This is strictly dealing with pet cremation.
Okay.
And there are already, human regulations for human crematories. There's nothing for pets.
Wow. Okay. Definitely a step in the right direction for sure. That was surprising.
And it's very, we're not really getting into heavy regulation.
Right. Trying to
know, as the owner of the pet, exactly what you're getting, and they need to stand by it.
Right. No, that makes complete sense. You're paying for a service, and like you said, pets are as children, they are fur babies. So,
Yep,
okay. Senate Bill 220, moving on, social work licensure compact.
Well, I have several compacts, so let's just talk compacts in general, okay? Because I've got the psychologist as well. Part of what we did last year with Live Healthy, and it was very much a part of that initiative that President Pasadomo really focused the whole session on, was to expand our services in the state of Florida in medically related areas. And one of the ways we can expand, and we have such a need for psychologists, we have a need for social workers, we have such a mental health crisis going on now, that we are now with these various bills saying that we are going to go into state compacts with other states, and as these and different states these are being stood up across the country. And if you go into the compact, you have to agree that if you're licensed in one state and they're in the compact, that the regulations for licensure are equivalent across those states, and that person can, if they're licensed in that state, then they could also practice in your state. So they can get a license in your state.
Makes sense.
So it's a way of expanding workforce, both for psychologists, for social workers, to increase the numbers of people we have who can practice in the state. Also, a lot of the mental health therapy can be done via Zoom, telehealth.
Here we are.
Telehealth is we have, since the pandemic, learned so much about how we can expand resources by using telehealth. And this allows, of course, then for cross-state, if you're in the compact, cross-state telehealth communication with clients and providers.
Speaking of that, did you see something? I saw it come across the desk. I don't have it in front of me. I think it was Medicare that put out that they're going to cut telehealth at the end of, I think, March or beginning of April. I think it was a Democratic, this is federal.
Yes.
Congress had decided that it cost too much. It took away from the Affordable Care Act. So they're trying to eliminate the telehealth, which sees unfortunate.
Yes, I think Medicare had decided, and I think it was legislatively mandated, that they would eliminate the telehealth provisions that had been put in place during the pandemic. I think that's wrong. We have seen great impact from telehealth, especially in the mental health arena, where you've made access to real healthcare that you wouldn't have access to. Mm-hmm. And there are certain specialties that are not appropriate for telehealth, but there are many that are. So to just say we're not going to pay for that anymore, I think is very wrong.
Very unfortunate.
I have done lots of legislation in this arena. In fact, it took me 6 years to pass the first telehealth bill.
Wow.
So and people now the pandemic really made it very clear that this was legitimate, that you could actually help people. You can, with appropriate screening, you can diagnose specific things. We also have so many electronic devices. This, for instance, has expanded the ability to really be able to assist people. And there's negatives to it too. When your grandkids are on the phone all the time. Screen time.
It's true.
But there are ways, and we have so much equipment out there, whether it's blood pressure monitors,
Right.
whether it is your glucose monitor readings you can upload. There's just a whole variety of things that you can do now that were not available years ago, and that really help implement telehealth.
It is. I appreciate you touching on it, and it is unfortunate that they've made that decision. The next bill, the Senate Bill 222, Public Records and Meetings Social Work Licensure Compact.
That's part of the compact bill.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just you have to have a public records exemption to do that.
Okay. Senate Bill 264, Step Therapy Protocols.
Another favorite bill.
They're all your favorites.
Yes, I do have some favorites, a lot of them. This is a very important bill. As I was saying earlier, we are having a mental health crisis in Florida, in this country. And we want to make sure that we have the ability in treating patients with mental health conditions, that they have access to the medication that is going to help them. And psychotropic medications are very specific to the individual person. And there's different reactions by different people. It's how your brain works. It's how the chemistry of your body works as to what the effect of that medication is. Currently, within Medicaid, we have what's called step therapy. And you have to use the drugs that are on the preferred drug list. And this is a list that is made up by a committee working with Medicaid that we get rebates back. And they are different classes of drugs. There's specific drugs in each class that then are, you have to use those drugs before you can go to another drug that's not on the approved preferred drug list. So you have to fail first before you can get to the appropriate medication that your physician feels is the one that's going to help you. And with psychotropics, this is very devastating. And the impact of not being on the appropriate medication is huge. And the societal impacts are huge. We passed a bill a couple of years ago to not require the step therapy for drugs dealing with schizophrenia and specific types of schizophrenia. This bill expands it to all categories of severe mental illness, including things dealing in the postpartum or prenatal maternal health care. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember the situation we had here several years ago where a mom was having such a severe postpartum depressive reaction and was actually psychotic at that point and threw her baby off the second story of the roof, not the roof, the stairway. Okay. And she was in a psychotic break. And, this is going to make sure that even, that prenatally or postpartum, that when you are having that significant depressive reaction or going into any psychotic event, that you have access without having to fail first. So I think this is the right step to have access for severe mental illness, to have access to appropriate drugs that your physician feels are the right drug for you without having to fail first on medications that are on the preferred drug list.
So important. And this is an example.
I think it has a fiscal. The ACA has put a $50 million fiscal on it, but other states who have done this, Michigan, for instance, they actually have a significantly less rate of hospitalization and Baker Acts for individuals when they're on the right medication. When you have open access for severe mental illness, then you have fewer Baker Acts, you have fewer hospitalizations, and actually, at the end of the day, fewer very difficult events where somebody goes, very psychotic and does very dangerous things. So the societal impact can be huge. It's not just the price of the medication, it's the societal impact and cost across the board. That's important.
This is an
And most
example.
important is the health of the individual.
Absolutely. And this is an example of we're getting bills and legislation for laws we didn't know we needed, but we do. And here you're letting doctors be doctors.
Yes,
They
letting
know.
doctors be doctors.
They know
And
this
choose
best.
and do there's very specific requirements, but to make sure that medication is the appropriate medication for that patient.
Makes sense. I really appreciate you going through these bills. And folks, I know this is going to be a long show today, but this is incredible to have a senator sit down and talk about each of her bills. And I just have to say, you can tell how well studied you are on these bills. You know why you're passing them, why they're being introduced, and why they're important. So I appreciate that insight.
I'll try and be a little more concise.
No, these are important. It's fantastic.
I will try and be a little more concise.
You're fine. I just want to say thank you. Senate Bill 266, tax of electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
Oh, eVTOLs. I'm so excited about this. I don't know if people realize what the future is on these vehicles. This is the day of the Jetsons.
It is. Flying cars. There's a company for flying cars already. That's very close.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes, these are flying cars. Yes, and we want to. This provides a tax exemption for the purchase of these eVTOLs in Florida. We're trying to bring the industry to Florida. So it's a new industry. We did some legislation last year. We weren't able to get it across the line. But this year we decided we want to make sure that we're encouraging these companies, and it's still very much in the beginning stages that we get these companies to Florida. But the Jetsons are coming to Florida.
The Jetsons are coming, and technology moves quickly. So it's going to be interesting when we start seeing this happen. The next one is Senate Bill 294, collaborative pharmacy practice for chronic health conditions.
Okay, we want to make sure that when we have collaborative practice between a physician and a pharmacist, and what that entails is that the physician allows the pharmacist to change your medications, to titrate your medications. But there are certain things that it's not appropriate for. And under current statute, that collaborative practice, what the list of medications or conditions, not medications, conditions that they can that are allowed for a pharmacist to essentially practice medicine is we had originally in statute a list of about 6 different conditions. The Board of Pharmacy, under the bill that was passed, I think about 5 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, expanded the list. And there was conversation to expand that list even further to allow for cardiac failure, heart disease to be one of those conditions. Now, high blood pressure is okay. That's titrating the medication you're taking. But when you talk about congestive heart failure, when you talk about a whole variety of cardiac conditions, whether you need a defibrillator, whether you need a whole variety of things, you may need a pacemaker or whatever. A pharmacist can't diagnose that. Mm-hmm. So, and under current statute, they can make that decision without the Board of Medicine's approval. They are to collaborate, but they don't have to have approval. So we wanted to make very sure that those that specifically cardiac diseases, because they had tried to do this, are not included in the list of things that they can that are appropriate for a collaborative practice between a physician and a pharmacist.
Okay.
Sorry for the detail.
No. I'm glad it's all foreign territory to most of us, including myself. So I appreciate the insight for sure. Senate Bill 342, Public Records Agency for Healthcare Administration.
Okay, this is another public records exemption. And, the Agency for Healthcare Administration really is the regulatory body of our facilities, such as hospitals and nursing homes. and assisted living facilities. And when they go in and do inspections, and they sometimes close down facilities, there can be some angry people. And we have had incidents where they have stalked managers of facilities, where they have where individuals who are angry because something happened, and maybe ACA didn't enforce something against what they thought was inappropriate. For instance, if a patient passes away in a nursing home, and maybe the children feel that the nursing home was at fault, and ACA says, no, this was not, then we've had incidents where they've actually stalked people who are the inspectors. So it's gotten a little out of hand. As you know, there's a lot of emotion out there when you have difficult things.
Right.
So this is just to protect the workers at ACA, the inspectors who go in and keep their names and the addresses and information out of public records.
What's
As
ACA?
well as children, because they've stalked the children too.
What is
So,
ACA?
all family members. It's a protection, and we are the Sunshine State. We have sunshine laws that require open records, but there's times when that's not appropriate. And we want to protect our workers as well as, the general public.
Definitely. And what is ACA? What does it stand for?
Oh, the Agency for Healthcare Administration.
There we go. Okay.
Talk in alphabet soup.
I know, there's a lot of acronyms out there. Senate Bill 372, dense breast tissue screenings.
Okay, we want to make sure that there's notification. If you have dense breasts, you're much more likely to have breast cancer, and that you can go and you don't have to have that. If you all have that diagnosis, that insurance companies will pay immediately for an ultrasound to make sure.
Very important. Okay. Senate Bill 386, self-storage spaces.
Okay, this has to notification for self-storage, and to allow the people to be able to advertise, on the internet, not just in newspapers.
Fantastic. Senate Bill 434, interstate compact for a school psychologist.
Again, just what we talked about.
Senate Bill 436, public records and meeting interstate compact for school psychologists. Same thing. Senate Bill 464, certified recovery residences.
Okay, this is my continuation of what we're doing in partnership mostly with the Palm Beach County District Attorney's Office, the whole crackdown we have done on the whole drug situation in sober homes, and making sure that we have the appropriate that entities that are really taking care of people who have addiction problems are doing so appropriately, whether it is the addiction facility, the detox facilities, the treatment facilities, or the sober homes where they live thereafter. So this is a continuation of the work we're doing to really making sure that we have appropriate facilities in place that are regulated to the degree that they need to be in order to provide the services. And they're not the scams that have been going on for many, many years in this arena. It's a continuation of that.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. This is something where you have to keep tweaking it because there are so many scams out there. It's amazing. Senate Bill 512, medical marijuana edibles. Okay.
We have medical marijuana. I'm not a fan of marijuana. I see the implications, especially in the mental health arena, with the schizophrenia, long-term psychosis, and things that happens after years of use. But we do have, under the Constitution, medical marijuana. And we want to make sure that when you are getting an edible, we have very specific requirements on edible, that you know exactly what is in it. And so that is not, the THC level is not noted on it. So we want to make sure that you're informed as to exactly what you're getting.
Okay, sounds like a smart labeling legislation. Senate Bill 514, medical malpractice review committees.
Okay, we have a situation, and this deals with our managing entities, which are the entities that really are the safety net for those suffering with all kinds of addiction or mental health. And when they are evaluating a complaint, we want to make sure that they are part of the public records exemption, and that when those conversations are exempt from public records.
Makes sense. Senate Bill 524, newborn screenings.
Okay, we have a whole long list of things that we screen for. This is adding another condition on newborn screening.
Okay.
So as new things come to light, we want to make sure that we're screening ahead of time, so moms and dads know if there's a condition that they need to be very much aware of, and that there may be appropriate treatment for. So we're expanding the different things that we screen for.
Do you know particularly what things you've added to the screenings?
This is I'm trying to remember specifically what the diagnosis is, but I can get that for you.
Senate Bill 520. Okay. Senate Bill 526, nursing education programs.
Oh, one of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites.
Again.
We have many nursing programs in the state of Florida. We have a great need for nursing, and we want to have the best nursing programs. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And we have two types of nurses that these programs address: the LPN, licensed practical nurse, and also RN, registered nurse. And each of those entities, when you finish your coursework and your degree, you take what's called NCLEX, the national exam. And there's a national NCLEX exam for LPNs and RNs, two different tests. Florida, right now, out of 50 states, in passage rate of NCLEX is number 50.
Oh my gosh, terrible.
Yeah, we are number 50. So we are really looking at specifically, how do we make sure that all our nursing schools are up to standards, that they are providing the education that is necessary for a nurse who spent a lot of money going to a nursing school. And these are, there are our universities, there's our state colleges, there are private colleges, and there are for-profit colleges. So we had an incident, you may remember 2 years ago, we had a situation in Palm Beach County where there were 3 fly-by-night nursing schools that were issuing diplomas simply for payment. And they were eventually closed. And in fact, the FBI came and investigated it, and there was a big thing about it. And the owners of it were arrested and prosecuted. Good. So they were called Nightingale schools, I think. There are 3 of them in Palm Beach County. People wind up in debt. They go to these schools, they pay a lot of money, they wind up in debt, and then they can't get a job because they can't pass the NCLEX. So we are looking very carefully at the requirements we have for nursing schools. We want to make sure that students are getting the appropriate education, and that if they fail the NCLEX, that there's remediation. Part of the agreement when you pay your tuition is they will do everything they can to help you pass that exam, whether it's a pre-test, whether it is remediation. We're looking specifically at remediation is required if you don't pass the NCLEX. So it's a whole variety of things we're looking at to make sure that we can really bring up those standards, and that all the schools in Florida, and we have some dynamite schools, and we have some schools that are not so good. So we want to make sure everybody is good in the state of Florida.
Is there somewhere somebody that's applying to nursing school can go and look to see what the graduation rate of passing those tests?
Yes, and that's very important. You can go online to the Department of Health, and if you Google NCLEX, you can pick up and find out. And that's part of the transparency that I think is absolutely essential.
100%. Is there anything? We just had a horrible case down in Palm Beach County, as a matter of fact, where you probably heard about it. The nurse was attending to somebody that was Baker acted, very large man, and she may lose her eyesight. He almost beat her to death. Is there anything the state legislature can do to help protect these nurses? I think, staffing might be an issue. I don't know.
I don't know what their staffing levels are. It's very difficult when someone is in a psychotic break or whatever was going on. I have no idea. People can be very, very dangerous. And I think that's a judgment call as to what happens, how you deal with a patient, whether where you are in the emergency room and the appropriate place to take someone who is in that psychotic break. So I don't know the specifics of the case, but this legislation doesn't address that. But we had a situation back in, I want to say 10, 20 years ago that really started the whole look at mental health and Baker acting, where in St. Lucie Hospital, where we had some nurses attacked there, where an individual was dropped off, actually by, I think, law enforcement, and went in and then, may have even killed somebody, as I remember, in St. Lucie Medical Center. Not St. Lucie Medical Center, St. Lucie Hospital.
Okay. Like you said, these psychotic episodes, it's just nobody expects them to come. And if you're a nurse and you have to attend.
That's why, mental health treatment is so important. And that we have, and I'm so thrilled that we are finally recognizing this, and that we're getting rid of the stigma, and then we're getting the appropriate treatment out there for people.
Right. It's a long process, but absolutely one step at a time, right?
Yes.
Senate Bill 740, continuing education requirements.
Continuing education requirements. I'll have to come back with you.
No,
Off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me.
We're almost to the end. I can't believe you just know all these anyway, so that's amazing. Senate Bill 770, cybersecurity.
Oh, cybersecurity. Yes. We have a major problem with cybersecurity across the country. And we're seeing more and more hacking, more and more problems, and especially in healthcare. We've had a real problem in this. And this is really empowering the DMS and what we call Florida Digital Service to really identifying what their job is and helping them, empowering them to be able to do more in order to address cybersecurity in the state of Florida.
Definitely need it.
It's a small step in the right direction. We may be looking at other things in cybersecurity. Having done a lot of work in the health IT arena, I can tell you that this is a field that we are just tapping into. What is happening out there and the cost, especially in healthcare, where you have people holding all kinds of records for ransom, where you have them blocking, where you have them destroying records is very problematic. And we need to really make sure we have the ability to do everything we can to regulate this, to stop it, and make sure that our Florida Digital Service dealing with our state is well defined and has the ability to do what they need to do.
Never let your guard down, that's for sure. Senate Bill 1156, Home Health Aid for Medically Fragile Children Program.
Another favorite.
Sounds like it. I figured.
Yes. This bill is so important. We have many children who would be in nursing homes, but fortunately, we have moved to a situation we want to have these children at home if at all possible. We want them out of nursing homes. So what we're doing through Medicare, through Medicaid, is they have home health services. And, whether it's LPNs, registered nurses, or nurses' aides, this type of thing at home. And most of them, they're a very specific category of medically fragile children. And they require 24-hour care, essentially. And what we're doing is allowing parents with the appropriate training by a home health agency be able to be paid to be a home health aide to take care of those children. We would be paying for another person to do it if the parent can stay home and not have a job, but stay home for 8 hours a day and take care of that child for those 8 hours and be able to do things like trachs and, very specific, difficult tasks that child needs and be trained specifically to do it, then they should get paid to do it. because we would be paying somebody else to do it. And what happens frequently is that it's very difficult to find nurses. It's very difficult to find a lot of the well-trained home health aides. And, you have to have 4 or 5 people to cover one child. So this deals with our workforce issues, but also then has a very close relationship, helps that child have their mom or dad be their home health aide.
Nobody ever takes, in my opinion, better care of your child than yourself. So,
Yes.
And I know there's probably exceptions to that, but for the most part, I think that's a true statement.
Yes. And there would be supervision. They would be well trained, and the agency would be responsible to make sure that the care was done appropriately.
Okay.
There are
So there's oversight to make sure it's happening the way it's intended.
Oversight. Yes.
Senate Bill 1166, Services for Medically Needy Children. Sounds
okay.
similar.
This is kind of part of the same thing. This is also where making sure, again, that medically needy children get the appropriate services. This is kind of a continuum of this.
Okay. Senate Bill 1182, Medicaid coverage of continuous glucose monitors.
Okay, yes. If you have diabetes, you most likely have a glucose monitor. And you can either prick your finger or you can have one that's inserted. If you are on a pump, you probably have your pump and your glucose monitor are tied together. And they become really medical devices. So it's a different category of payment than a pharmaceutical, which would be the insulin and sticking your finger and that kind of thing. So this is just a clarification that you can also, Medicaid covers these glucose monitors under the medical equipment category as well.
That makes sense. Senate Bill 1224, Administration of Controlled Substances.
Again, this goes back to our substance abuse issues, and we want to make sure that we have everything is regulated appropriately on substance abuse issues.
A lot of related bills. Why aren't they all put in one bill? Just
then you would have a mega bill. Yes. As you can see, I do a whole lot in the healthcare arena. This is kind of my little specialty, but education and healthcare are kind of where I am.
All right. I looked up Senate Bill 740 real quick. I know you'll be able to touch on this now. Continuing education requirements, revising applicability of certain provision relating to completion of a continuing education requirement for licensure renewal to exempt certain building code administrators and inspectors.
Yes. This is very interesting. And this was brought to me by our local building department in Port St. Lucie, that when we did a whole big bill several years ago on deregulation, we really, unfortunately, there was one thing that was in it that just doesn't work. And that is our building inspectors are no longer required to have continuing education. Building codes change,
Right, they do.
And conditions change. And as we're looking at hurricanes and everything else, the state is putting more requirements in. Local counties and cities are changing building codes. And those inspectors need to know what the update is.
Makes sense.
So they need continuing education. So this is a need to make sure that those building inspectors know exactly what they're inspecting and what the code is that they are requiring people to meet.
So folks, this was all the bills Senator Harrell has introduced today. This is incredible. You have been on here for an hour, and thank you so much. Folks, we talk about lack of transparency. This is transparency. The senator introducing the bill is, come on, you've talked to us about each and every bill. She wasn't sitting there with her notes. She didn't know I was going to ask her about these bills.
No, I have no notes in front of me.
No, she has this information right here in her head because she's been working so hard on them. And Senator Harrell, hats off to you. Thank you so much for this information. And I can't tell you how much we're going to look forward to hearing about what's happening through session as it goes forward. We'll talk about other bills that are probably hot that are your bills, but there's a lot of things that'll happen during session. And we won't go into it now, but there's already been a lot of things with early session and with the immigration policy. So you guys have been hard at work already. So
well, thank you for doing this. And, my door is open. People have questions. They can always call my office. And we are, hopefully we'll have all our bills filed. We have, I think, one more to go.
Why? Okay. I'll ask you about it next time.
Okay.
Senator Harrell, thank you again so much for joining us today and filling us in. Good luck up there.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Look forward to continuing the conversation throughout session.
My pleasure. Take care now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.